I didn't lose control that night. I learned how far I could go without it. I don't come back to this song for nostalgia. And I don't come back to it to justify myself. I come back to it because it appeared at a moment when I honestly stopped recognizing who I had become, or why I was still doing any of this at all. All Apologies sits at the very end of In Utero, and that placement was never an accident to me. The last track is what plays when you're out of strength. When there's no energy left to hold posture, project confidence, or keep the mask in place for anyone. We recorded the album in February of 1993 at Pachyderm Studio in Cannon Falls, Minnesota. Cold, remote, cut off from anything that felt like an industry hub. The record came out on September 21st through DGC. It debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200 and went platinum quickly. On paper, it was a clear success. In real life, it felt like the moment when whatever I was feeling inside stopped belonging to me and started circulating as something other people could examine, interpret, and use for their own narratives. By then, my life was already locked into a rigid system. Tour routing decided where I woke up and where I went to sleep. Contracts dictated when I had to be available and what version of myself I was expected to present. Interviews weren't conversations anymore. They were tests. Any pause, any silence, any careless sentence instantly turned into a storyline someone else completed for me. If I stayed quiet, I was troubled. If I snapped, I was angry. If I disappeared, I was falling apart. There was no neutral space left where I could exist without signaling something. That reflex didn't start with fame. It started much earlier. I grew up in Aberdeen, Washington. My parents divorced when I was 9. I watched adults talk past each other and saw how attempts to explain yourself only escalated conflict. I learned early that if you don't insist, if you don't push your point, the noise ends sooner. As a kid, that felt like survival. As an adult, it turned into avoidance. Silence became my default. Even in music, I started hiding behind form instead of confronting things directly. By early '93, I was afraid of repeating one very specific pattern, being swallowed by attention again, and losing the ability to step away from it without consequences. Never mind, erased anonymity. After that, missing a show or skipping an interview was never neutral. It was read as a statement, a protest, a breakdown. It fed an ongoing story about me being unstable, difficult, self-destructive. I couldn't disappear for a few days without reinforcing that version of myself. All Apologies didn't arrive as a finished song. It showed up as a feeling that kept coming back. Late nights in the studio, when everything else felt overworked and heavy. I'd pick up the guitar just to keep my hands busy. The same fragment would come out. I'd stop, set the guitar down, walk away. At some point, I said out loud that it was too simple, that it didn't belong on the record. I meant it. One night, I told the engineer not to save a take. The tape went into a drawer labeled not to use. I remember closing that drawer and feeling relief for a few minutes. Then that relief dropped out and left nothing behind. A few days later, I told Chris and Dave we weren't going back to it. I saw Dave tense up. The album was already a grind, and cutting anything meant more work, more pressure. I felt that reaction and kept pushing anyway. It wasn't dramatic. It was flat, cold. Like I was shutting something down because I didn't want to deal with what it was asking from me. My body was already worn down, constant travel, bad sleep, food whenever it happened. My stomach hurt most days. My breathing stayed shallow. My shoulders never really dropped. When I tried to sing louder or push harder, my voice didn't break in some expressive way. It just stopped cooperating. A limit, not a choice. A few times, I cut a take short, dropped the guitar, and walked out without explaining myself. Nobody knew if I'd be back in 5 minutes or not at all. Chris had been there since the beginning. Bass player, friend. He didn't argue when I said the song was done. He just waited. A few days later, I heard him playing that same progression again, quietly, almost absent-mindedly, like he was checking whether it still existed without me. I stayed in the other room longer than I needed to. When I finally walked back in, what bothered me wasn't the music. It was realizing the song didn't need my permission to keep going. Dave approached it carefully. He suggested tightening the rhythm, giving it more drive. Every time he did, I shut it down. During one rehearsal, I cut him off hard and said if we kept pushing it, I'd pull the track completely. I walked out and slammed the door. The next day, we worked in silence. No jokes, no small talk. That silence lasted longer than the argument, and I didn't try to break it. Steve Albini stayed out of our personal conflicts. He cared about honesty in sound, not comfort. But when the label pushed for radio-friendly mixes of heart-shaped box and all apologies, and we brought in Scott Litt, I took the same indirect route again. I didn't talk to Steve directly. He found out later. He saw it as a betrayal of what we'd agreed on. I saw his reaction and stayed quiet. After that, conversations got shorter. Pauses got longer. We finished the record, but something stayed unresolved between us. Courtney was my wife then. Our daughter, Frances, had just been born. I kept telling Courtney and the people closest to me that I was fine. I wasn't. My state showed up as sudden mood shifts, withdrawal, and an inability to stay emotionally present. Saying I'm okay was easier than explaining why I couldn't be there the way I should have been. It preserved distance. It didn't make anything better. In the end, all apologies stayed. Not because I trusted it, more because taking it out would have left a hole I didn't know how to fill. I apologized constantly. To the label, to the band, to the audience, to people I cared about. For delays, for outbursts, for being difficult. Most of those apologies didn't change anything. They just ended the conversation. When we recorded MTV Unplugged in November of '93, I felt how the song worked in silence, the pauses, the waiting, the way attention gathered and stayed there. I didn't look away. That awareness stuck with me longer than the applause. Once the song was released as a single, it stopped belonging to me. It moved on without me, into rooms I wasn't in. For me, all apologies isn't about peace or redemption. It's a question I never answered. Who am I apologizing to, and what happens if I stop? I spent a long time confusing openness with honesty, because openness let me manage how people reacted. I still don't know where honesty ends and control begins. After we finished recording it, I'd leave the studio and check my hands. If they were steady, it didn't feel like relief. It felt like the tension had just gone quiet, still there, still unresolved. That feeling stayed with me longer than the song ever did.